Okay, welcome to chapter 25, and in this chapter we are going to get passive imperatives. After learning the passive forms, we're going to review negative imperatives, and that will be all the imperatives in Latin, except for these few irregulars, sum eo and dic duc fac fer. And so we'll finish with practice, and if you can do the practice, then you are good to go for an entire mood of Latin. Of course, we need to start by reviewing what these mean. The thumb towards you means I, you, he, she, it, we, y'all, and they. And then with passives, O, I becomes I am blanked, or S becomes you are blanked, ris. T becomes he, she, it is blanked, tur. Mus becomes mer, tis becomes mini, and unt becomes unter. Alrighty, and of course the handcuffs signify passiveness, that it's happening to you, maybe against your will, not that you're doing it. So the action is coming inwards rather than going outward. And the rule for imperatives is that we take the second person forms, these two, and remove any final letter S that we find. So for active imperatives, we'll remove these two, and for passive imperatives, only that one. So before we start with passive imperatives, let's quick review how we made active imperatives. We started with our standard present tense conjugations like this, and then we took the second person forms, these two, and changed all the ones where it ends in a S. In this case, all of them. Okay, so let's take away that final S, and this is what we're left with. And after we do that, we have a final sound that is either the distinctive vowel of that conjugation or this weak, flaccid, hanging, short I, which doesn't sound good at all and isn't Latin. So if you remember, what happened to that I, as people said it over and over and over, was that it distorted to an E. And that is how you get the active imperative. Kade, fall. Kape, take. Kadite, fall y'all. Kapite, take y'all. Okay. All right, so what about the passives, and also the deponents, by the way? Well, we're going to do the exact same thing. So start with your standard present conjugations, and remember the passives have this weird middle E that distorted before R. But other than that, everything is the same, pretty much. And we start with that, and we take our second person forms, these two, and then we change which forms? Right. Anyone that ends in an S. And look, it's only the singulars this time. Okay, well, let's do that. So let's remove final S, and we do that, and what do we got now? Well, now we've got that weak, flaccid I everywhere. Oh boy, so guess what this is going to do? Right, yes, it's going to distort to an E. Now this should look very familiar to you. What form is this in the singulars? That's the infinitive, isn't it? Wow! But guess what? Now you know that it's also something else. Now it is the passive imperative. Be blanked, you. So negare, be denied. Habere, be had. Petere, be attacked or sought or questioned. Capere, be taken. Audire, make sure you're listened to. Be heard. Okay, so that's just weird to think about. The infinitive, which is the concretization of the action, to blank, is really the same homophone, the same thing, as the form that means be blanked. It's kind of like they took the most abstract abstraction that they could, where nobody's doing it, but it's just happening to you, and then concretized it to make it their infinitive. Okay, so that's weird. So, but in any case, from now on, whenever you see this form, yeah, it could be to blank, like the infinitive, or it could be a second person imperative. You, be blanked. Now, what about the plurals, though? What do we got down there? Well, there was no S, so it's exactly the same. So, kapimini is you all are taken, but it could also be imperative. Be taken, y'all. Okay, so this is the imperative form down here. All right, so take a good look at this, get your fill. These are the forms you're going to have to recognize through the rest of this video and this chapter. So if you're wondering why the second principal part looks like that, with nothing verbs and short I verbs both being grouped into the same ere conjugation, well, now you know. There was that middle E distortion, which grouped them together, and then the final flacket I distorted to an E also. All right, so how do we pronounce this? Let's go through all 5 conjugations. First, long A verbs. So the indicative mood is vocaris, vocamini, and you want to trill it. See my trill here in black? Right, so you want to trill the R. That trill signifies what? Reverse action happening to you, yes. So vocaris, vocamini, while the imperative is vocare, vocamini. Very similar. And if you remember, actually, even the indicative sometimes uses this final E form. It's very rare in Latin, but it does occur sometimes, especially in poetry. And if you remember, I lied to you back in chapter 18 and said you would never again see this again. Well, I'm sorry. I didn't foresee that I would use this, but I am now. But you needn't worry about this because I will never give you RE as a second person singular indicative form. I will never do that. For me, if you see RE, that's an imperative. Okay, it's so rare you needn't really worry about it. So that's basically the imperatives. All right, let's go on to second conjugation, long E verbs. Haberis, habemini, you are had, versus imperative, habere, habemini, be had. And of course, the indicative could technically be either one, but the imperative is only that. All right, let's go on to third conjugation, nothing verbs. Dicaris and dicimini, you are spoken, becomes dicere, dicimini, be spoken. All right, and of course the indicative could be either one, but the imperative is only that. All right, great. Now let's go to short I verbs. Capiris and capimini is the indicative, whereas the imperative is capere, capimini. So the only difference between this one and the last one is now the middle distorting E is not technically in the ending, but is technically part of the stem, because short I was distinctive of this conjugation. But it sounds exactly the same as nothing verbs. Both are ere or eris and imini. All right, so, and then fourth conjugation, long I verbs, is audiris, audimini, versus imperative is audire, audimini, be heard. And of course, the indicative could be either one, you are heard, but the imperative, be heard, is only that one. All right, so before we can bring all our imperatives together, let's briefly review the negative imperatives that you had at the end of chapter 21. Okay, so to do this, you want to stop the video and review this vocab and make sure that you know all the meanings, and you probably also want to know also what conjugation each of these words are. Obviously, you can figure it out from the second principal part if you did like you should have and memorized that second principal part too. If you haven't, do it now. Okay. The black ones, of course, are deponents, and the gray one here is a semi-deponent, halfway in between, with some active and passive forms mixed in. Okay, so the negative imperative, if you remember from back in chapter 21, involved the infinitive. And how do you get the infinitive? Well, if it's active infinitive, then you just take the second principal part. But if it's a passive imperative, to be blanked, what do you need to do to this second principal part to make it passive? Hopefully you remember you change the last E to a long I. Except in third conjugation, where the whole ending becomes long I. And you might ask, well, why did it do that? Remember, well, because once upon a time, way back in Latin, it was short I, R, long I. Cari. And those two sounds, short I and R, were so short and quick that they disappeared. The I was just supporting the R. That's all it was doing. And the R was just a little flutter. Kari. And that flutter was so small and so fast in a nothing verb and in a short I verb that it just disappeared. So kari became kati, and kapari became kapi. That's how it worked. So that's why those two became that. The flutter just was too fast to stay. Unlike other conjugations where, like wokari and haberi and audiri, there the A and E and long I are all doing something. They're not just supporting the R following them. Okay, so those stayed because they are distinctive. So now we've reviewed how you get those present infinitives. And these are the only two we're going to use. We're only going to use the presents. We're not going to use those other three. No, no, no. Just these to make the negative imperative. All right. So here's how you do it. To say don't, if you're speaking to one person, you say no li. And if you're speaking to many people, you say no li te. Don't. Or literally want not, because it's from this verb nolo, to not want. So no li, don't want. Don't want what? Don't want to deny, to terrify, to unbind, or to bind. Or up top in the black, don't want to be denied, don't want to be terrified, to be unbound, to be bound up. Okay, so that was how you made the negative imperatives. And so hopefully you shouldn't have a problem with redoing these exercises over here. I encourage you to do that right now, even though you already did it back in chapter 21. But even if you don't, just remember that this is how you make the negative imperative. It's not and ite. No, it's noli blankera and nolite blankera. And of course, you want to think of the passive imperatives up here as an action incoming to the subject, whereas the active ones down here are an action outgoing away from the subject. And the answers for the exercises over here are that. All right. So now you know how to do all the imperatives in Latin. So let's put them all together on a single graph. So I want you to recite these, and this is how it's going to go. Okay, so first let's do first conjugation, and it's going to sound like this. Listen. Woka, wokate, wokare, wokamini, nolite wokare, nolite wokari. Like that. All right, so you try it with me pretty slow the first time. Ready, go. Woka, wokate, wokare, wokamini, nolite wokare, nolite wokari. Very good. All right, say it a second time, this time a little faster. Ready, go. Woka, wokate, wokare, wokamini, nolite wokare, nolite wokari. Good. And a third time, this time fast. Ready, go. Woka, wokate, wokare, wokamini, nolite wokare, nolite wokari. And a fourth time without me. Ready, go. Very good. And now second conjugation, long E verbs. Just listen, it's going to sound like this. Tere, tere, te, tere, re, tere, mini, nolite, tere, re, nolite, tere, re. Right. All right, you try it yourself. Ready, go. Tere, tere, te, tere, re, tere, mini, nolite, tere, re, nolite, tere, re. Good. And do it a second time. Ready, go. Tere, tere, te, tere, re, tere, mini, nolite, tere, re, nolite, tere, re. Good. And a third time. Ready, go. Tere, tere, te, tere, re, tere, mini, nolite, tere, re, nolite, tere, re. Good. And a fourth time without me. Ready, go. Great. All right, nothing verbs. It's going to go like this. Just listen. Ready? Perda, perdite, perdere, perdimini, nolite, perdere, nolite, perdi. And you say it. Ready? Go. Perda, perdite, perdere, perdimini, nolite, perdere, nolite, perdi. And say it a second time. Ready? Go. Perda, perdite, perdere, perdimini, nolite, perdere, nolite, perdi. Good. Say it a third time. Ready? Go. Perda, perdite, perdere, perdimini, nolite, perdere, nolite, perdi. Good. And the last time without me. Ready? Go. Great. And short I verbs. This is how it's going to sound. Cape, capite, capere, capimini, nolite capere, nolite capi. All right, you try it. Ready, go. Capite, capere, capimini, nolite capere, nolite capi. Alrighty, and the second time. Ready, go. Capite, capere, capimini, nolite capere, nolite capi. Good, and a third time. Ready, go. Capite, capere, capimini, nolite capere, nolite capi. And a fourth time without me. Ready, go. Good. And lastly, fourth conjugation. It'll sound like this. Audi, audite, audire, audimini, nolite audire, nolite audiri. All right, you say it a first time. Ready, go. Audi, audite, audire, audimini, nolite audire, nolite audiri. Nice. And a second time. Ready, go. Audi, audite, audire, audimini, nolite audire, nolite audiri. Good. And a third time. Ready, go. Audi, audite, audire, audimini, nolite audire, nolite audiri. Good. And a fourth time without me. Ready, go. All right, and then the final last several irregular imperatives that you need to have to get truly everything in Latin are these. A weird future imperative that we'll learn, and then sum and eo and dic, duc, fac, fair. Okay, so the future imperative is also in some books called the second imperative or the third person imperative, although you will see in the bottom line here that the third person imperative probably implies it's something else and that book was probably just wrong. Okay, but in any case, you've had the green rows at top, and now take a look down at the blue rows down here. These are rare. They are technically future imperatives. So it's like, will it so thoroughly that you will not forget even in the future and will still be doing it then too. Have enough willpower intention that you will be willing it from now on. It's really serious. And to convey this seriousness, it uses a very dominant long O sound. So if I ask you what is the dominant sound or what vowel always occurs in the future imperative, look at it down here. What's it going to be? Right. Long O. Much more powerful than I or eh in the present imperatives. Okay, so I will never ask you to write these. They are not in the course, but I need to expose them to you today because they do pop up in famous phrases. They're not very common in actual Latin literature, but they do occur a lot in these famous little phrases. So let's take a look at these endings here. To is singular, tote is plural. That's kind of expected. Tor is passive. And then if you see an N in there, then it's kind of like third person. Now, second person is you do it. What would third person be? That is what we have in things like the formal voice of French or Spanish. Like in French, it's vous instead of tu, but in Spanish, it's even more closer to this system right here. In Spanish, you don't say, you stand up. You say, let him stand up. Like he's standing right in front of you, but you're referring to him as he. It's excessively formalistic. It's the kind of thing that you would only hear like a nun say or a king say to you if they wanted to act really standoffish and authoritative and formal. So a third person is even rarer yet. I have never seen one in Latin, but hey, here are the forms for it in case you ever do. So that's the idea of third person as being like, I'm too good to even look at you. So take a look at these examples on the right. Most of these are real examples from real Latin, and see if you can figure out what they mean. Several of them are famous phrases. This is just for fun, of course, because I will never make you do this in real life except right now. So just see if you can get it. All right, stop the video and then start it again when you're ready to see the answers. And the answers? Okay, so memento mori. Remember mori. Mori or mori, more to assume. Remember to die, or remember dying. Esto propitius. Be propitious, O gods, to us poor mortals. Adsunto. Be present. Kaweto, or kawetote. Beware all y'all. Cras petito. Dabitur. Ask tomorrow, it will be granted. Me auctum scito. Well, this is skio, skira, skiwi, skitus, to know. And then know me sold. Now, what verb needs to be supplied there? Right, esse, because it's an indirect statement. Know me to be sold. But you could just use it, know me sold. So that's an indirect statement. More Englishy, you might say, know that I am sold. Si cabeto, o mi tiro. Now, tiro is a name, so thus have it, O my tiro. Ne arato, semen ne yaceto. Now, ne you haven't had yet. That's a subjunctive don't, and that won't come until chapter 27 or so. But don't plow, seed, don't throw. Ipse venito. Now, this is third person, so here we can use a third person form. Not to ipse, but just ipse. So it's he self come, but it's more like you come, is the way it's supposed to be taken. It's just very formal. Come himself. And then last one is philidam solus habeto. And this again is formal. Being alone, have Philidus. So in other words, it's have Philidus by yourself. I'm not coming to tea. It's just going to be the two of you this time. Okay, and then the other two irregular verbs we need to get are sum on the left and eo here on the right. So from stage 15, repeat with me. It goes sum est, sumus estis sunt, right? And then over here, the forms of eo to go are, say it with me, eo, is, it, imus, itis, eunt. Remember that? Yeah, okay. So to make the imperatives of these, guess which row we're going to use. Right, we're going to use the second row, and what are we going to remove? That. So anywhere you see a final S, remove it, except for that final S, because that's just a single syllable or something. I don't know. It would have been too small to have just E as the imperative. So I guess for some reason the S stayed there. It's a weird exception. Okay, and so when we remove these, we're going to do all our standard E distortions, but here I'll do it on the next slide. All right, so for be and go, there is no passive voice of those verbs. You can't be beed, and you can't be gone. So, all right, so the singular forms are s and estis. Well, not yet. Pause that. We're removing the final s, and then what happens to the hanging short I? Right, it distorts to an e. So there's your present active imperatives. Be. And then in the future, it's what you would expect, esto and estote. And in third person, sunto. That makes sense, right? Yeah. Of course, I'll never ask you these blues down here, down in the futures. It's just for your exposure right now. And then for the verb to go, the forms are is and etis, except that we're going to remove the s. And so now we're left with that. And what is going to distort now? Right. That's going to distort to an e. So e, go, or ite, go, y'all. And of course, I could add on all the various prefixes that these get. So ad-e would be what? Right, go toward. Ready would be what? Right, go back. What about prodite? Y'all go forward. That's what it would be. Exi, go out. Right. Same with sum. What would ades be? You, be present. What about abeste? Y'all, be gone. And I could even do it down low. Ab esto. You, be gone. Not just now, but from now on. Ab esto. All right. And similarly, down in the futures for go, ito, go. Itote. I've never seen this form. Okay, I'm sorry. Now, if sunto over here was the third person in be, what do you think the third person in go is? Yeah, remember the weird form? Eunt, just like sunt, eunto. Okay, but I've never seen that. These are the only ones you need to know. So get a good look at that, because we're going to use it in a second in the practice. And then the final group of irregulars is deek, duke, fak, and fair. Now, the passive forms are completely what you would expect for these. So deekeret, deekimini, be spoken, dukeret, dukimini, be led, fakeret, fakimini, be made, and fereret, ferimini, be brought. As for the actives, we're going to have to change these a little bit. So wherever you see a singular, you're going to remove the eh. I don't know why these four verbs do that, but they do. Okay, they're exceptions. Normally you would have the eh there, but these don't. So deek, speak, duke, lead, bak, make, fair, bring. And then one other minor change is in the plurals of bring y'all. Guess what we're going to do to this little I? Yep, it's going to disappear. So it's not ferrete, but ferte. Bring y'all. Okay, so these are the irregular ones that you need to remember. Everything else you could figure out just from standard rules. These five are exceptions. Deek, duke, fak, fair, and ferte. Okay, so now let's practice all these imperatives that you have learned. You have now got them all. But to practice it, you need to know these words. So recite these. Nego, negare, negawi, negatus, etc., etc., etc. And make sure you know the meanings of all of them. Okay? Now, how are you going to do these? Well, here's my suggestion. First, check and see if it's negative. That's a dead giveaway. If you see don't, then it's going to be negative, and you're going to use one of these forms. Noli or nolita. Pretty simple. Now, if you don't see don't, then next thing, check and see if it's a deponent. Now, how are you going to know if you need to use a deponent, basically a passive-looking form? Well, you're not going to know unless you know all your deponents. Here we've got 6 of them in this exercise, but technically, here's all the ones that you know all over. So you need to be keeping track of these, because if in a story I ask you to use one of these verbs, these are very common. I mean, there aren't very many deponents, so they should pop out at you that whenever you see one of these words, marvel, confess, suffer, wait for, lie, step, or go, you can always use a deponent form. All right, so if it's one of those special words and it's a deponent, then you're going to use a passive-looking deponent form like that. But if it's not one of those, if it's just a regular old verb, then you're going to have to use one of these, the actives or the passives. So how do you know? Well, if it's just blank, then it's active. But if it's be blanked, then it's passive. All right. Of course, the one exception would be if the actual verb itself is be. Then in that case, be is not a sign of passiveness, but it is the actual active verb. Okay, but that's one little exception. And then once you've decided which row you're going to use, then decide whether you need the singular one or the plural one. How would you know which one you're going to use? Well, got to look at what? The subject of the sentence. If you're talking to a singular, oh listener, then you use a singular verb. But if you're talking to a plural, oh students, then you're going to use the plural verb. Why is that? Because subject-verb agreement says that the verb must match the subject in person and number. In this case, though, everything is second person. So, just number. Okay, so notice that there's that weird ref form that is both an active infinitive, but it's also used as a passive imperative ending. So note that it looks active, wokare, but it's actually passive. Be called. Alrighty. Okay, so stop the video and try these, and then turn it on when you're ready to see the answers. And the answers? Hopefully you were able to get all of these. All right, and then last is to see how well you are keeping track of the meta grammar of what's going on. Try these questions on a scrap sheet of paper and stop the video and then start it again when you're ready to see the answers. And the answers? Okay, so obviously this first question you might not have known, but this whole chapter was about mood, the imperative mood versus the indicative mood, which is what you normally use. All right, so now you've learned an entire mood in Latin. You know every last way to make the imperative mood in Latin, and these are all the forms. So give yourself a pat on the back and get started on those stories. Walete!